While ancient graveyards are the traditional symbols of the macabre, modern construction sites often harbor a far more aggressive form of residual energy. Concrete and steel become high-density anchors for the shock of sudden, violent deaths, trapping entities in the very bones of our growing cities. This environment became a trap for Kamal, the only son from a poor village in Rajasthan. He carried the heavy expectation of supporting his aging parents, a burden that left him open to manipulation. A predatory employment agent exploited that desperation, promising a stable future before dropping Kamal in the country of Georgia. He found himself geographically isolated, unable to speak the language, and forced into a dangerous high-rise job he was never trained to perform. Kamal was functionally invisible to the world around him. This profound isolation and psychological fatigue stripped away his natural mental barriers, creating an ideal opening for a parasitic entity to take hold. Kamal spent his days on the 15th floor of a high-rise plagued by daily accidents. The atmosphere on the site was suffocating, thick with a negativity that the laborers could feel but never name. The presence began by siphoning energy from the building itself, causing frequent electrical shorts and equipment failures. It soon began projecting a specific suicidal pull into Kamal's mind, a mental weight that vanished the instant he left the site, only to return the second he clocked back in. On his 5th day, the influence turned physical. Kamal heard a disembodied voice whisper his name. As he turned to look, the pressurized glue canister in his hands inexplicably detonated. The blast was catastrophic. It shattered Kamal's jaw and completely blew off his nose, leaving him disfigured, mute, and bleeding out in a foreign workspace. This wasn't a mechanical failure. The entity had successfully bypassed Kamal's physical defenses, using a common tool of his trade to force him into a state of total, paralyzed helplessness. Kamal was moved to a high-security hospital ward, where nurses strapped his wrists to the bed to prevent him from touching his surgical wounds. Heavily drugged and physically restrained, he was effectively entombed within his own body. 2 figures with burnt, distorted faces began appearing in his room. They moved with a chilling fluidity, phasing through the solid hospital walls as if the physical security of the ward meant nothing. Because Kamal was tied down and lacked a jaw to scream for help, the entities were free to indulge in sadistic physical torment. They stood over him for hours, mockingly prying at his facial bandages and fresh incisions. The psychological warfare intensified when they brought in a 3rd figure. This entity carried an industrial wood grinder, pretending to power it on, and saw Kamal in half, while the human security guard slept soundly in the chair outside. This is the particular cruelty of a targeted haunting. The very medical system designed to save Kamal's life had paralyzed him, creating a perfectly controlled environment for a parasitic force to feed on his terror. The torment reached a breaking point when the entities manifested the exact type of industrial glue canister that had caused Kamal's initial injury. They forcibly pumped the thick, suffocating industrial adhesive deep into his shattered nasal cavity and down his throat. They even packed the glue into his navel, ensuring the material was forced into his very core. When doctors arrived to find Kamal convulsing and unable to breathe, they discovered his internal cavities were packed with the industrial glue. They were forced to perform an emergency section procedure to clear the blockage. Unable to explain how industrial-grade construction material appeared inside a locked ICU, the hospital staff chose the only rational target they could find. They had the sleeping security guard arrested, accusing him of the assault despite a total lack of motive or evidence. The surgical extraction of that glue from Kamal's internal organs serves as a grim forensic marker. The attack left behind physical evidence that survives long after the victim's testimony is dismissed as a hallucination. Kamal eventually returned to India to recover, but the trauma followed him. Hoping a new environment would break the cycle, he moved to Russia on a study visa, believing the nightmare had been left behind in Georgia. He soon discovered that the entity was no longer tied to the 15th floor construction site. It had successfully anchored itself to its soul, surviving the journey across international borders. In his Russian apartment, the violence resumed. Unseen hands hurled him against walls in the middle of the night, while the burnt-faced entities reappeared at the foot of his bed with a new, whispered vow: "We will kill you this time." The attacks became hyper-visceral. Kamal experienced a vivid dream where an entity used a surgical needle to physically sew his lips shut, a phantom attack so intense that he woke up in a state of agonizing, real-world physical pain. This is the reality of a permanent attachment. Geographical distance and legal borders provide no shield once a parasitic force has claimed its host. Broken and exhausted, Kamal abandoned his education and turned to severe alcoholism to survive the nights. His life's potential was systematically dismantled by a force he couldn't see or fight. He has since booked a flight back to India, vowing to destroy his passport upon arrival. He plans to never leave his parents' home again, trading his freedom for the perceived safety of his birthplace. Kamal eventually turned to priests and rituals in a desperate search for relief. These failed attempts underscore the necessity of a kavach, a spiritual armor. In an era where we focus entirely on physical safety, we often wander into high-risk environments without any form of metaphysical protection. Parasitic entities linger in the forgotten corners of our modern infrastructure. They wait for a moment of weakness to turn a simple pursuit of a better life into an